Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I don't have any new ideas for an intro. No one's emailed me in regards to that. So, you're going to have to deal with that for the time being. I am your host, Ray Harkins, and we're at episode number 41. And the guest this week is Derek Archambault, or Archambault. I'm not exactly sure how to say it. I probably should ask my guests how to actually appropriately say their name, but I usually forget. So he is the vocalist for the band Defeater, and he also has his own side project called Alcoa, which I enjoy very much, just as a side note. But more on him in a minute. Propertyofzach.com, our great friends. They should become your great friends. You should follow them on Tumblr. You should follow them on Twitter. You should do all the things that I do because I find a lot of enjoyment out of that site. Visit there for all of the most recent news, a different slant on the coverage. They definitely cover things that, may not be picked up on other sites. So go visit them. You will not regret it or feel like you're wasting your time there, even though all this stuff is kind of a waste of time in probably our parents' eyes. But anyways, that's besides the point. Two other things. I've been getting a lot of emails recently. That's awesome. Keep them coming. You can email the show 100wordspodcast@gmail.com, and I promise I will respond and we will become friends. And because that's what I do. I sometimes become fast friends with people. Not like BFFs forever. And yes, I do that. Use that term. I don't know if I would say it ironically, but I find it funny. So anyways, email the show. And if you are feeling oh so generous, go to the iTunes store and drop us a review. We're at 75 reviews. That's awesome. I like the fact that people give the show feedback, tell me what they like, what they don't like. I can't remember the most recent review, but someone dropped something nice and said, "Get Jeremy from Touche Amore back on the show." And I'm working on it. He's a busy boy, and we've hung out, and I've talked about it, and he's interested, so we'll get around to it. And then visit the website, 100wordspodcast.com. I try to put up some interesting content during the week in between the shows, so follow us there if you're a Tumblr person, or just visit the website. Anyways, I wanted to talk about one thing before I dove into the guest. It was something that I've had a few different conversations with people over the course of the past few weeks, before the internet took over everybody's lives. We never knew, I say we, like those of us who grew up without the internet initially, you didn't have a sense of what bands like looked like before. You maybe a shot or two in the record, like in the album art. Maybe you would see something in like a zine or a magazine, but sometimes you kind of just like, I don't know what this band looks like at all. And I don't know if that serves a purpose. Like, I always remember this is something that I really wanted to do for my old band, Taken, ripping off this band called Elliot. They were a great sort of post-hardcore, emo, whatever you'd like to call it, band from Louisville, Kentucky. The first time I saw them, they were all wearing like black slacks, white button-up shirts and ties. Because I remember, like, when you see a band setting up their equipment, you already have a sense of kind of, who they are, what they're wearing. Like, just, you're able to, maybe you've never heard of the band, but you can look at kind of what they're wearing and be like, oh, that's like a hardcore band, or like that's a metal band, or whatever. You're able to make immediate presumptions on them, or about them, about the music they play, not as people, obviously. But I remember Elliot, like I was already a fan of them, and I had an inkling of what they sounded like. I had like a few songs on a 7-inch that they released on Initial Records. And so I was excited to see them. And so they show up looking like this, and I was kind of like, that's weird, man. Like, they look like they just got off work at a bank or something. And I remember reading in an interview, the singer, Chris Higdon, I think, he talked about how he wanted to create a blank canvas. So it's like people wouldn't know what the band sounds like if they've never heard of them, seeing them set up and seeing them, kind of get on stage and be like, hey, we're Elliot. And I loved that idea. And so, because, whatever, you're flipping through the latest issue of Outburn or Alternative Press, or looking at band promo shots or their Facebook page or their Twitter avatar, whatever, you immediately judge a band based on that fact. good or bad. You just immediately know kind of maybe what they sound like, what they're trying to achieve. And, sometimes that hurts a band where it's like, the image may turn people off immediately. Like obviously the more theatrical bands that are around today, they musically, you may be super into them if you just didn't have any image attached to them. If you're like, hey, here's band A, listen to them, sight unseen. You listen to, you'd be like, oh, this is pretty good. And then they'll be like, oh, it's this band. It'll be like, oh man, it's that band. That band sucks because they wear eyeliner or whatever. So yeah, it's just an interesting dichotomy of what has sort of happened within music, and obviously how image has always been an important part of rock and independent music. But yeah, I just find it interesting, and I've been having more conversations about that recently where it's like, I have no idea what a band looks like when they're coming to town, and like, I think that dude's in the band, and they do their thing, and like, oh, okay, that's what they have going on. So anyways, food for thought. Derek from Defeater. I met him, I think 2 years ago at South by Southwest, and because I was already friends with the drummer for Defeater, and then met the rest of the guys. And Derek and I immediately gravitated towards one another because he was like, hey, we were label mates. And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, I played in this band called Transistor, which was on Level Plane Records, which had released one of my old band's first EPs. And so I was like, oh shit, that's right. Like, I forgot that I had some recollection that he played in that band. But yeah, and so immediately we just start hanging out and trading stories and talking about stuff. And ever since then, I've loved the band. I was already familiar with them and enjoyed them prior to that. But then after that point, and then getting to know all the rest of the guys in the band, just cemented them as just honest, legitimate, working band that has a very unique point of view within the hardcore scene. So yeah, that's how I know them. And Derek was, awesome in the sense of, we did this interview over 2 different places. One, I met up with them when they came through Southern California, did a little bit of the interview in the van, and then about a month and a half later, we met up over the phone after they got back from some international touring. So the fact that Derek was cool enough to carve out this much time for the podcast was awesome. So here it is in all of its somewhat edited glory, because I had to pull out some sounds from the van and other various things that were my fault. So I apologize if it sounds choppy from time to time, but that's just, you get it for free. I mean, are you going to complain about that? And if you are, I'm sorry. Like, email me and I can refund you your time. Well, no, I can't do that. But anyways, so here's the interview with Derek, and I'll talk to you after.
Derek, how do you say your last name?
Archambault.
Archambault, okay.
Yeah, or Archambault, depending on what part of Canada you're from.
Archambault.
Yes, Archambault or Archambault.
Yeah, so I won't do my own radio intro for you or anything like that. But usually, and I'm recording right now, so it's okay. Usually I like to start things off with just like my own first, like either exposure of either your band or just like you as a person. And I distinctly remember meeting you South by Southwest like 3 years ago, maybe. Yeah. I think it was 2010, possibly. Yeah. So yeah, 2 years ago. And then obviously like making that connection where it's like, we met at that Touche show.
Yeah.
And it was like, I'd already previously known of your band and enjoyed your band, and so it was like nice to connect on that level. But then when you were like, yo, we were label mates, and I was like, wait, what? And then when you pulled out the transistor, I was like, I had no idea that you did that. And it was just like, it just shows like stuff like that always blows my mind, where it's just like, if you've been involved in independent music for like five years or longer, the world is so fucking small.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how small it is.
You just trip over people where it's just like, you have these connections where it's just like, whoa, oh, wow. Like, I wasn't expecting that at all. And then it was just really funny for me to kind of have that, like, oh, wow, that's cool. And then obviously we became best of friends ever since. But where were you always born, or were you always on the East Coast and kind of born and raised out there?
Yeah.
Where in particular?
I was born in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Okay.
I lived there until I was like 4, and then my parents built a house in Candia, New Hampshire, which is like 15 minutes away.
Okay.
So it's still super small town.
Sure.
Manchester is like the biggest city in New Hampshire. But,
Right,
you know,
right.
pales in comparison to Boston. It's more like a Worcester size.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because
but,
I went to Manchester. I think I played there once, and it was like the show was cool. And I mean, Manchester was cool, or at least the vibe that I got was cool because it's like it's a big enough city to have stuff,
Yeah.
but
I
not.
think you played in Concord. Was it the Taken show?
Yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
Totally did.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. But yeah, but it's like I love those cities that like I said are big enough to have some sort of sense of culture,
Yeah.
but not not be like like Los Angeles where you're just like, oh my God, there's
You're
so
just
much stuff to
lost.
right.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff to do, like you don't even know where to begin or sort it out. But so okay, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Like because no one knows anything about New Hampshire. Like
No
it's
one.
like it's this totally like mythical state.
Yeah. People are just like always confused. They're like, wait, is that above Maine? They're like, no, Maine's above us. Like, where's Vermont next to us?
Right.
Above Massachusetts. Wait, what?
Wait.
It's just like, where is that?
I don't even know where that is.
Yeah.
Geographically speaking, makes no sense.
But yeah, now I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is like the much more like progressive
Okay.
leftist part of the state where it's like
Uh-huh.
everything is like super artsy and
Sure, a lot of culture.
yeah, a lot of culture. There used to be a great punk club there called the Elvis Room, where like I saw like the Bruisers and
Yeah,
Against All Authority and
nice.
Swingin' Utters and
Sure.
Business and stuff
All
like that.
all the
It was-
classic punk stuff.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Now it's just like there's no venue anymore really. There's just
Yeah.
a bunch of bars that try to get people in, but there's always
Issues.
issues. Like we used to throw shows in the basement of this like it was a barbecue restaurant.
Oh, okay.
And they let us like have shows in the basement. It was finished off and they wanted it to be a venue, but they were always afraid of all ages shows. But we had like I don't know, like I was working with Ricky from Guns Up at the time.
Oh, okay.
And so we had like Guns Up play and a few other like punk shows, and shit
Yeah.
just got out of hand and the bathrooms got destroyed and
Right.
the kids were drinking
And then
so-
you're left holding the bag, so to speak, where it's
yeah, well, I didn't throw that show, thankfully,
okay.
but the kids who did, it was like,
right.
you can't
It came
book here
down on
anymore.
them. Sure. Yeah.
And-
Once they're like, our venue got destroyed, or our place of business got destroyed.
yeah,
This sucks.
and they're always worried about like, well, we can't have all ages shows because they want to make money off the bar,
Of course.
and
No one's buying.
yeah,
People
no one's
are-
buying Cokes.
People are buying $1 water, if that.
Yeah, and they're just scared of like getting the licensing to do even like 18 plus shows where
Right.
you can X up the 18-year-olds
Oh, okay.
and then still serve and make money, but it's just like a foreign world to
Oh,
them
totally.
because Elvis Room closed in like 98, so it's been a good like
Yeah.
15 years since there's been
Yeah, a legitimate, solid venue.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny because more often than not, you see cities that obviously don't have that, and it's like when cities do have it, they take it for granted a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Where it's just like they're like, oh yeah, like I've got within an hour drive, I've got like 10 places I can see a band. And 3 of them are like the most awesome, legitimate, all ages venues that have their shit together, and it's just like you should be fucking appreciative.
yeah, totally. And like that place you guys played,
Yeah.
Concord, is gone.
Yeah.
And the place that's left in Manchester, it's only been doing shows for like maybe like 5 years.
Okay.
And the promoter who was booking everything got super sketchy and tried to like just pull one over on bands and
Yeah.
get kids to sell tickets, and then
Oh, yeah.
he's keeping overhead, and
Yeah.
like we did the first show of our first tour there with End of a Year,
Mm-hmm.
and End of a Year ran into van troubles because they were using Nick from Aficionados,
Okay.
and they were using another van, and they had to end up using Nick's,
Mhm.
but they couldn't get there, and the promoter was like super worried about like, well, like I don't know, like they didn't show up. Do I pay them? Like, or
Right.
like I don't want to fuck over Death Wish, but like you know they broke down like an hour away. They couldn't get here. Like, what do I do?
Right,
Just,
right.
Like, fucking email Andy. Like, figure it out, dude.
Yeah,
it's not on
yeah.
us. Like,
Right.
like
Yeah, don't be asking me these questions. Like,
Yeah.
sort it out with the person you booked the show with.
yeah, totally.
So, do you have kind of the New Hampshire pride about, you know, being where you're from, just because obviously it is kind of this, you know, unknown.
Yeah, I mean, our state motto is "Live Free or Die," which is
pretty badass.
it's the best state motto out there.
I
don't want to be
agree.
like fucking Keystone State.
No, not at all. That's
Nobody even knows what that is.
right.
Like, what the fuck's a Keystone? It's a
It's true.
beer? What is
Yeah.
it? Fucking ice?
Right,
Keystone Ice?
that
Give me
is
a
the
30
ol-
rack of that.
That's true. That is. I totally forgot that was New Hampshire's motto. Because I definitely, obviously, have seen that, and people, you know, wear the state motto shirt, and it's pretty.
It's super touristy too. It's like, you know, during the fall we have all the leaf peepers, and we have the White Mountains. We have Mount Washington, which is like a huge.
Sure.
There's a sticker that's like my car climb Mount Washington. All this shit.
Yeah, basically all the outdoorsy people.
Great
go.
skiing and stuff.
Got it.
Great camping up on the Kangamingus River.
Mm-hmm.
So people who do know about it, like people in New England or New York, like we get a flood.
Really?
Especially in Portsmouth, just because it's on the coast, or like where I live is like 2 blocks from the ocean.
Oh wow.
So it's like we're right on
Picturesque,
the water.
right,
Very
right.
picturesque, like thriving businesses.
Mm.
But it's just a flood of tourists.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
winter and summer. So
Yeah.
it's like you never really get a break from outsiders.
Right.
It's never really like it's never really your own town. It's like a bunch of
Right. Just a bunch of transient people that come
Yeah.
in for a week and then
Yeah.
leave. So what did your parents do? Like, you know, like you said, they built a house and, you know, moved you a little bit further, but
we moved when my dad was like finishing up his like DJing career. Like,
Oh,
he
wow.
DJ'd on a few radio stations. He did some stuff in Boston. Then he got a job in Manchester doing like, this was when AM was still
sure,
a
a
thing.
thing, yeah.
And so he was like an AM DJ, and then he did like stuff on the side, and
Mm-hmm.
he got a job working at like Catholic Hospital in Manchester, doing like all the AV tech stuff. So just like the
Oh, okay.
resident nerd,
Sure.
just anything any
Yeah.
doctor needed for.
Like I need someone to do my PowerPoint, whatever.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, like make every presentation, create the fucking PowerPoints and slides, and
Right.
like, just like get their shit together for them. So
Sure.
when they're like going to do their 3rd-year talk or whatever, it's like,
Yeah.
here's all the shit. So he was just like the nerd there forever, and they fucking laid him off last November
Oh,
or
it's
something
rough. Yeah.
after 30 years of employment. And
Oh, that
it's
sucks.
because this like crazy tax that New Hampshire was implementing on all the hospitals.
Mhm.
I don't remember exactly what
Bill or
happened in the
whatever.
bill,
Okay.
or exactly the bill.
Uh-huh.
But every other hospital in New Hampshire, except for the Elliott and Catholic Medical Center, which both my parents worked for. My mom's in like office management and stuff.
Oh, okay,
for
sure,
that.
sure.
So she's done like a bunch of different medical fields, but I was just like managing the offices,
Sure.
and they just fucking didn't prepare for it,
Right.
and they laid off
A lot of people.
maybe like a quarter of their
Oh,
staff.
That's rough.
And it's all the way, it's the people who had been there the longest went the first.
Of course. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
usually they obviously pay the highest.
Yeah,
ones.
they're paid the highest. The
They're
newer
closest to retirement,
positions,
sure.
closer to retirement. The newer positions are, technologically speaking, more needed.
Right,
quote unquote,
desired, sure.
Desired. So
Yeah.
he
So is he kind of viewing this as an early retirement in a way?
sort of, he went kind of nuts not having a job.
I can imagine.
But he actually just got a job at the music hall,
Oh, cool.
in Portsmouth, which is like a 45-minute drive from where their house is.
Sure.
And it's actually the building right next door to the record store that I work at. So
So you're like,
my dad's
hey,
gonna
Dad.
be he's gonna be working right next door to me.
you.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So you got like the front of house, just like
Oh yeah,
still
sure.
doing AV stuff. So
That's
it'll be
cool that
rad.
he's been able to still transition and
Yeah.
do that obviously throughout his whole life.
So he's fucking stoked right now. He's like,
I can
on cloud
imagine.
nine.
Yeah, for sure. And it sounds like the way that you talk about your parents that you had a pretty good relationship with them.
Yeah, not always.
Well, of
you know.
course. I mean, there's always mountains and valleys in every relationship.
Yeah, the finding punk at 14 and turning into a little shithead, just wanting to be in a band. Fucking,
Right.
My dad and mom are very, very supportive of every decision I made for like whatever I wanted to do. Like
Sure.
I grew up very fortunate, but when it turned to music, it was like, my dad helped me get my first guitar. Like we split it, and first amp split it, and he was just like, all right, like cool, like do what you want. And it was, I was still like getting into punk rock, but I was in this like Britpop band where we just wanted to be Oasis and Blur, and
Sure.
Ride and Slow Dive and shit.
Of course.
It was the fucking 90s.
Right.
It was 94. So it
Which
was
is like the heyday for obviously all of that.
yeah. And
I see. It's funny that you. So was that kind of your first band, so to
yeah,
speak?
yeah.
I find that so impressive because I do find that most kids that obviously, like you said, get into punk, they're not. They don't have, I guess, the wherewithal to kind of put together, because that by all classifications, that's like more sophisticated music, I'd say.
I guess, yeah. We still didn't know our ass from our elbow.
Right, I'm sure, but you guys
we were
were
covering Bob Dylan, but like we'd do like a Bob Dylan cover and then like an Oasis cover, and like the Dylan cover was just super washed out and jangly and like
right. You couldn't even tell it was a Dylan
yeah,
song.
exactly. Like
what was the name of that band?
Fuck.
I know.
It went through many names.
Sure.
There was. I don't even remember.
Well, see what the funny thing that I find, another common theme that I have in a lot of these interviews is like when people do, reveal their first band. I mean, it has to be terrible.
Yeah, there's one Knox too, like KNOX.
Okay, that's not. I mean,
I don't even know where it came from. I joined the band and then it lasted like 6 months. I started out on drums because they didn't have a drummer,
right?
And that was like my first instrument. And
sure.
Then, like they didn't have a drummer, and I was like, I don't want to play drums.
You're like, this kind of sucks. Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's a backbeat the whole time. It's just
right.
Like,
you're like, I can't do anything but this beat. Like,
yeah.
I don't know about this.
And then started playing guitar in it, and then quit because I couldn't handle the singer.
Yeah.
But
I think it's a common theme. Like, if you go into your first band and you have a good band name, like, that's so fucking rare.
it's so rare,
So
especially
rare.
being like 14, 15.
Dude, yeah. If you could, like, my first band, Doom Society, like,
It's pretty sick.
pretty sick. I mean, like, like, I think we ripped it off from like that punk band from Minneapolis, Code 13. I think
Yeah.
they had like a Doom Society song. We're like, that's fucking badass. And it's like, if you don't have that experience of having like a terrible band name, like, you're not as fortunate as the rest of us.
I mean, I've been in some really fucking bad bands. Some really bad bands.
But I mean, obviously, you can take all those experiences and realize, like, okay, this is what I don't want for bands in the future.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like girlfriends in a way. We're
Uh-huh.
just like,
100%.
I get a date. You got to figure out what it is. Like, okay, that type of person sucks to be in a band with.
Yeah.
So when you, like go around that sort of 94 era. So like, as you were transitioning into, high school, and obviously music kind of got introduced to you at a pretty early age.
Very early age. Like, my parents were huge music fans.
Yeah.
Like, they saw Springsteen in his heyday, like,
Amazing.
Asbury Park era, like Born to Run, just like
Yeah.
The River, like
That's amazing to see that. Yeah.
And so, The Clash, Springsteen, Todd Rundgren, just like always in my house. Those
That's
are, like,
awesome.
the three like big ones that I remember, and obviously like the Beatles and the Stones and stuff like that too. But even at a young age, I guess I was just like, oh, I love the Beatles, but like Springsteen just has like this different feel. Like it was you know, it's like
You gravitated towards that more.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it had like a little bit of everything. Like, oh, there's horns in this. There's piano. Like,
Yeah.
you know, there's organ.
There's a lot going on in this. It's not
Yeah.
just the, you know, drums, guitar, bass.
Straight pop song.
Right.
You know, Springsteen and Todd Rundgren too. Like, his instrumentation is insane.
Right.
And their like poppiest songs could run on for 7 minutes.
Sure,
and it's
sure.
still like the most like gripping, catchy thing in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Hey, man.
So yeah, music at a super young age. Like,
Sure.
London Calling is still like my favorite record of all time, and there's still always finding like new little nuances in that album that,
Right.
you know, 20 something years on, it's like
Sure.
still interesting.
Right.
to
Still such a textured record that it's like, oh, I can still find, yeah, it's like you said, something new in it that you didn't hear before.
But yeah, and then like, you know, in high school, going from like not playing in that band anymore and listening to more and more, you know, at that time, it's all like finding out about new bands through the No Idea catalog and like, you know, the Asian Man catalog and stuff like that. And so it was less like, I would still go to like all like the street punk shows and stuff, but I definitely found that, you know, like the more polished, like listening to like the Descendants did more for me than listening to Violent Society,
right?
Or like
you identified with it more, and it was more it was more up your alley.
Yeah.
What was the who introed you to kind of, you know, a lot of the punk stuff and started to transition into the independent music side of things?
The club that the Britpop band played at also threw all like the punk shows.
Oh, nice.
So
you kind of just like go to like all the shows that were held there.
Exactly.
Nice,
it was like the only spot in Manchester that had shows for so long.
Right.
And then there was a few other places, like the same guy that owned the place that you guys played at in Concord had a place in Manchester first, and he started throwing all like the hardcore shows. Like,
oh, got it.
And then like randomly, like Furia 5 played at this like this place called like Club Liquid. I think at the time, I think it was Liquid at the time, and like it was a rave hall, like dance hall, but they would throw shows.
Sure.
And you know, they'd have these like super, back when like the rave scene and hardcore weren't that far off.
Like style wise, we were probably right there.
Yeah, like exactly. Like the way everyone looked wasn't too dissimilar.
Right.
You know, everyone's got huge beads and baggy pants.
Of course.
And, you know, some of the kids are vegan straight edge, and some of them are
doing E.
Doing E. Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
But you
so
know,
just because that club was there, it was like, you know, you would pop into every show and be like, oh, like there's this, and this is why they sound like that.
Yeah, totally. Like got me into like Dropkick Murphys and like
nice.
And then like the next weekend they'd have like FYP or or then 25 to Life or iFarm or like
sure.
You know, like
you just
97A played there, and I was just at the time just like, what the fuck is going on?
Incredible.
Like it's like incredibly bad at the same time.
Yeah.
Like just like he's just
grunting. Totally,
like,
dude. So like you said, as you were making that transition to being more punk hardcore, your parents totally just like. Were you kind of like, you know, middle finger in the air, like, oh, fuck you, parents, like, I wouldn't be doing this shit? Yeah.
I mean, kind of, but it definitely was way more about like my personal life. I just like took the fuck you attitude to just like, well, you know, I'm a fucking punk. I'm gonna fucking stay out to whenever I want. Like, you know, I'm gonna go to this show. I don't give a fuck if you, if you say no or not. You know?
Right.
Like, so it wasn't like. I wasn't like studded out or anything, or you know, wearing like a
Liberty
butt
spike,
flap.
right?
Yeah, you know, still like, you know, had the same fucking haircut, still like pretty straight shooting kid, but you know, my grades slipped because I was going to shows all the time and like just stopped really giving a shit about high school. And
did you have kids in your high school that you would kind of because I mean
fall in with
and like where did you kind of fall in with the, you know, archetypes of high school where it's like, you know, you were kind of the sort of punk kid group?
Like freshman year it was like, you know, I made friends with everyone and it was like fine, but then, you know, as like the year went on and stuff, and like it was like I really don't want to be friends with these people.
You're like, why am I trying so hard with
yeah,
this?
like,
Yeah.
You know, like I definitely wasn't one of the cool kids. Like I wasn't viewed that way, and I didn't want to be in with them. So it was like, you know, the kids that beat the shit out of me in my freshman year, like were all like the older, like hardcore kids that, you know, still are somewhat involved in the scene in like New Hampshire and stuff like that,
okay.
which is
Funny.
Yeah,
it's funny that they're still around you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're not. It's like a whole different scene. It's more like
Yeah.
the punk skin, like.
Oh, okay,
you
got
know,
it,
scene,
got it.
Which is rad. Like, there's some great fucking bands that, like Yellow Stitches. They're from Manchester. They're fucking awesome. Word for Word.
Okay.
Like, Johnny's like the fucking sweetest kid. He's younger, but
Yeah,
same crew of guys.
that's funny.
But so like, yeah, they like these guys that, you know, I'd go to the lunch table and sit down and like, he was like, yo, fuck you, dude, you're in my fucking seat, and like choke me out and like throw me down. Like those are like the hardcore kids. And then like the next year, me getting more into it and stuff like that, I'm like, man, I didn't know like you had to be a hard ass to like listen to this shit, because
Yeah.
like I love it,
Right.
but I'm still just like the fucking skinny little
Right. I'm just like a meek little dude in the corner.
Yeah. But then like as like me and my friends, like all my friends were a couple years older than me, so they were like a grade below those guys. But
Got it.
so then when that crew of kids left, you know, they weren't 2 years old, they were a year older than me. So like we all got older, and like the older kids were gone, and then like we were
Sure.
like the older punk guys, and like we were
Right. You're the ones beating up the freshmen.
sort of, yeah, like in that way, like we were the ones viewed as like, oh, that's the fucking weird table. And,
Yeah.
you know, and it was the late 90s, so like there was like the explosion of fucking Marilyn Manson and
Of
shit
course.
like that. So then like we weren't like the weirdest ones anymore. Like there were the kids wearing makeup and like
Right. Next
crazy
step.
cargo pants and like
Sure.
listening to Korn and Slipknot, wearing the fucking jumpsuits and shit.
Of course.
And we're just like wearing like khakis and hoodies and like
Right.
you know, wearing whatever fucking band shirts
Band
we
shirts.
are.
Yeah.
And it's no longer like, who the fuck's Minor Threats? Like, why does that kid have eyeliner on in school?
Right.
So
You're
it's
like, yo, the heat's off us.
yeah, totally. Like, we could just act like assholes and throw fucking salami on the wall. And
That's
like,
incredible. I never thought about, but that's totally true. Where it's just like it did hit that point in the late '90s where it's like obviously that was on the tip of everybody's tongue, especially from like a mainstream perspective, where you're just like, is your kid into Marilyn Manson?
Yeah.
They're falling into the wrong crowd. Yeah.
They ain't right with God.
Yeah.
And like,
Totally.
and
That's impressive.
so, I don't know. And then even, you know, getting way more into punk rock and hardcore, like,
Yeah.
where it was like pretty much, I still had my appreciation for like Oasis and
Sure.
you know, like other, you know, like Third Eye Blind, like that first record is still one of my favorite records of all time.
Yeah.
And-
Unbelievable. Bless you.
excuse me.
Yeah, you're fine.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
But you know, where like there's a few select bands I still listen to, but you know, punk rock and hardcore just like grabs such a hold of me.
It consumes you.
Where it's like, you know, all I'm listening to, only going to shows to see that, and like being from New Hampshire, only an hour away from Boston,
Right.
so lucky. Like,
Totally.
got to see, you know, Kid Dynamite, Saves the Day, like
Yeah. Religiously.
religiously, like Fast Break, In My Eyes, like
Yeah.
all these, you know. And then right after high school, when I graduated,
Bless you.
I think I am allergic to my pants.
The stench is just
Jeez. And then so like, yeah, like all these amazing bands are popping up and starting out, and like, so I'm graduating right as like Through Being Cool came out, and Whenever You're Ready, and like
incredible records.
incredible records, and you know, Damnation AD, and like all this great shit.
Right.
And,
And
like,
I-
and Shape of Punk to Come, like
Oh,
me and
yeah,
my
yeah.
friends tried to go see them, and it was like, we gotta drive, we gotta go to like the Carolinas, we gotta go somewhere to see them.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh hey, Refuse broke up on that tour.
Right.
And before the internet, it
Totally.
was all just word of mouth.
100%.
And it was like, oh dude, you missed them, they broke up.
Yep.
And it was like,
Wait, what?
Like,
yeah.
I'm never gonna see that band.
Yeah, this
like,
is terrible. I same thing. Was waiting for him to come out here, and like, yeah, same experience where it's just like you heard the like, or it's like you saw the flyer for, all of the shows that were upcoming at this place, and then it was like canceled. And you're just like, what the fuck, man?
Same thing happened with Strife. Like, they broke up on the road before they could play New Hampshire, and like everyone at school was, well, the like 10 kids,
right.
We're all like super fucking stoked to see him,
right? So
and
bummed.
it was like, oh hey, Strife broke up, they're not coming. It was like,
what the shit? And so at the time you were obviously like playing in bands and getting your feet wet from that perspective. Did you know already from that point that you were like, yo, I gotta tour, I gotta have that experience?
We like wanted to, like, but we didn't, it was
have the ability to
at all.
Sure.
Like, and we were like we had like a ska punk band.
Oh,
like,
incredible. Dude, you've cut your teeth with like almost every style.
It was the fucking 90s.
I know.
So like 97, 98,
right.
We had a ska punk band, and we were like, yeah, we gotta play like out of state. We like want to get a fucking, use our parents' cars and like tour.
Do a caravan tour.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
use
then, like,
use your mom's minivan or whatever.
Yeah,
right.
and you realize that can't work, and there's no place to like get anyone to take you seriously because you're a 17-year-old kid.
Right.
And it's not like now where it's like, oh, you're a 17-year-old kid in a pop punk band?
Yeah.
Let's give you that fucking contract, dude.
Yeah.
We'll sign you while you're dumb.
Do you look cute? Perfect. We'll sign you.
Yeah. Boom. But so we had, me and my friends had that band, and then joined a hardcore band my senior year.
Okay.
And sang in that, but it was like, we played throughout New England, but it was way more like, it was when hardcore was still pretty metal tinged.
Of course.
So
metalcore-ish, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Metalcore, like Sistral or
Great reference.
Something like that.
Sure.
Where we all listen to Acme and Catharsis. And,
totally. Just this super dark metallic hardcore. Yeah, for sure.
But then also like that first like Keepsake record came out. We were all like, whoa, Florida. Yeah. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
Blue, like, what?
And
how do you sing and scream?
I know, that
how
first
do you do that?
Poison the Well record, was it Great Assault? No.
The actual full length?
No, the first EP. Distance Makes the
Heart Grow Fonder. Yeah.
That, we all get that, and we're just like, whoa.
What? Dude. Yeah.
So, like, it kind of, we're going from, like, that super dark, just evil, and it's just like, hey, man, we could do what they're doing. Like,
yeah.
And then broke up on a whim. And,
sure.
Just like every other band. Right. And then, like, started my own, like, 3-piece majority rule, like, worship thing.
Right.
And then that fizzled out, and then ended up joining Transistor, and that's when, like... So, like, over the 4 years from, like, high school to, like, the year after high school... was like a whirlwind of like playing in all these different style bands,
right?
And then
just in hopes that you'd be able to get out and like experience whatever.
And like when you're 16, 17, playing in like a ska punk band, but also like having a appreciation for like Madball, and stuff like that, and then like you start playing in heavier bands, and then I still never lost that appreciation for Slapstick. Like, they're still one of my favorite bands.
Right. No, that's and it's funny. I mean, you currently, well, I'm not. You worked in an independent record store. I don't know if you still
there.
And it's so funny.
11 years or something.
Right, and it's so funny because I think that experience that you're talking about, I think, is inherent with, like, once your musical world does open up, and you're kind of like, oh, I can listen to all these different things, and like not feel ashamed or like I can't like this because of this. Like, there's no mutually exclusivity in music. Like,
totally. And like, even in high school, where like it's there's like the sex within the punk rock scene where like before like emo was a bad word,
right?
Like getting into like the polyvinyl catalog and stuff like that, like getting like Sweater Weather 7 inches and getting the Promise Ring, and like that like 1998, 99 were like some of the best fucking years for music.
Totally,
like,
dude.
So while like being like, oh, like that self-titled Kid Dynamite record is one of the best records I've ever heard in my life, but I
Yeah.
also love like Framing Canvas.
Right,
and,
totally.
You know, like
Raina Maria is awesome.
yeah, and like we had Piebald in
Right.
the area, like
Totally.
but then Caven too. So it's
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Getting to see all Garrison and like all these
Yeah.
fucking amazing bands, ISIS and like
Yeah, it's just all
it was
kind of
so eclectic in
Yeah.
Massachusetts, and like that's the only place to see shows really. 'Cause
Right.
that place in Concord, we'd get stuff, but it was like mostly the local
Yeah,
the B
yeah.
bands. Like
right.
not getting Reach the Sky.
Right. This
We're
isn't
getting, like,
national touring acts. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
we'd be stoked if that happens, but it's once every 3 or 4 months,
Yeah,
something like that.
exactly.
Happens. So when you, I presume, as you were going through high school, you had no true desires to be like, I really want to go to college. I want to pursue this.
I did and I didn't.
Sure.
Like, in the back of my head, I kind of always was like, I don't know if I'm gonna do it, but
Yeah. You'll try.
I'm gonna try to at least appease my parents, and
Sure.
I wanted to go in for elementary ed, and I got into a couple different colleges, and I got a little bit of scholarship from college, but then got accepted, and then it came time to June, graduate.
Sure.
And the wheels really aren't in motion. I haven't signed up for classes yet. And
Right.
my dad's and the school that I was going to go to is 45 minutes away, the one I decided on. So it's not a big deal. I could be a little lazy, but then my dad had the conversation with me. He's like, hey, if you don't want to go to school, you don't have to. You want to play music? That's great. And I had a 40-hour-a-week job at the health food store in Manchester anyway, so I was doing well.
Oh, okay.
Enough.
Yeah, you were self-sufficient.
Yeah, no, he was you just better not fuck up and actually pursue it.
Wow.
Do it. Just go for it.
That's incredible that he had that hey, Derek, real talk.
Yeah,
that he
straight
had,
up.
That's cool.
He's a fucking amazing man, and it was a good 2 years after we had our really bad falling out,
Mhm.
fuck you, fist fight, punch each other in the face a few times because I said fuck you, I'm staying out till 2:00 in the morning with your car. And no cell phone, because there were no
Right,
cell phones.
cell phones, yeah.
Just no way of him knowing if his son's alive.
Right.
Where now I see that
Right.
as,
It's that you don't. That's not gonna compute in your mind. You're just
Yeah.
I know where I am. I'm
Yeah.
fucking fine.
I'm fine. I can take care of myself. I'm with my friends. If anybody fucks with us, we're gonna fucking beat them up. We just went to go see fucking Hatebreed. Fuck you.
Yeah, I had a great time. Thanks for asking, Dick.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
No, it's okay. I was just saying that I was pretty impressed that your dad had the sort of wisdom and foresight to be able to, all right, my kid's not going to fucking do this. I'm not going to
Yeah.
force him to do this.
Yeah, he definitely saw that if I went to college, my mind was going to be somewhere else, and I was going to constantly be wanting to, be in a band and eventually go on tour and stuff, and I probably would have fucked it up in the interim and then just wasted a bunch of money.
Right.
And so, I mean, not even just that. I mean, he just saw it as more of a positive. He saw how happy it made me, and the fact that we had come out of a really my junior and senior years in high school were we had a really bad, rough relationship. We used to get into fist fights and just we just had some rough years. But then when it came to me graduating and stuff, we had put a lot of that to rest, and then it got worse again. But then I don't know. I think he just saw that if that's what was going to make me happy, then he just needed to just let it happen.
Right. Not
fight it and then end up having me resent him.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's obviously a really important fact that you have to learn about, especially just in the way that we deal with one another in relationships and stuff. Because, when you do try to sort of fit a person in a box, whatever that box may be, it usually never works out very well. And like you said, that person will end up resenting you, and it'll be difficult to repair that relationship because Yeah, it's no good. So then as you were, so like when did the, because you played, I mean, you blew my mind when I met you at South by Southwest and you said, "Hey, we were label mates on Level Plane."
Yeah.
Because I had no idea that you played in Transistor. So when did that kind of come into play? And like, was that sort of the first band that you really, I don't know, I guess, quote unquote, took seriously, where it's like, all right, let's see what we can do with this? Or was there something before
Yeah.
that?
I mean, there was another band that, like in high school, I joined like some of my best friends in playing in this hardcore band that, you know, I took the role of singing in the band when I had never screamed in a band before. I had like, you know, I think I told you like I had those like ska punk bands in like 95, 96, 97,
Yeah.
98. And then like come 98, 99, 2000, like I think it was around then. Yeah, maybe not 98, 99, 2000. Joined this hardcore band that like some of my closest friends had, and then we tried to like take it as like seriously as possible. Like we got a chance to like play with like Undying and Zagoda and Catharsis and like all these amazing bands that we really looked up to. And they played with like Trial before I joined the band and stuff, and like they were the hardcore band in Manchester that was like, you know, doing it to a point, and then we all wanted to like go on tour and stuff, and we almost did, but then it just didn't happen. But I had like another band after that was just like a three-piece like majority rule J.R. Ewing type worship thing, and then I met all the Transistor guys because I was running a show space in Manchester and used to have them play all the time with like some of the kids from that hardcore band started another thing called Western Sky, and so there's like a bunch of bands in New Hampshire, like, and this punk band called The Insurgent, sounded like Lawrence Arms and stuff like that, and so there was all these like bands in New Hampshire that were, you know, doing well on their own enough like to get noticed by like Mac Rock and like stuff like that, where they would go down and play the Mac Rock Fest, and then you know, get like good regional show offers where they could like, you know, open up for fucking International Noise Conspiracy or something like that, and like, or play with like Backstabbers Incorporated when Backstabbers was like one of the biggest hardcore bands
in that area.
In that area, yeah. Because that was another band that just like kind of, you know, put their work in and came out of, you know, this fucking small New Hampshire area where no one knows that bands even exist, and they were, you know, constantly touring and playing with Advocate and all those like rad New England bands that kind of flew under the radar for so long.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, like just hearing all the bands that you're naming. It's interesting that sort of, you know, for lack of a better term, like, you know, Level Plane, Ebullition, you know, GSL, like that was so, you know, popular in that area, just because it was so, it seems so regional. You know, it's like you had maybe one or two bands from each city that sort of like tried to do that style. And sometimes it went somewhere and sometimes it didn't, but it was cool to hear that, you know, in New Hampshire, like you and I probably had the same experiences where, I mean, I didn't play in bands like that, but you know, I mean, in Southern California, we had, you know, San Diego an hour and a half away, which was obviously an epicenter for that type of stuff. So it's funny that across the country, that was also happening.
Yeah. I mean, it was happening on a much, much smaller scale.
Right,
you know, we didn't have, you know, Providence had a couple labels that was putting out stuff like that, like, you know, putting out the As the Sun Sets record and the, you know, Trillium Barnacle Lapse and Lightning Bolt and like all that stuff that Providence was like the epicenter for that type of stuff. Right. And I think that's why Backstabbers ended up on Trash Art, because Mitch saw it as like, you know, like it was a hardcore band playing in like 2000, 2001, 2002 that sounded like late 90s stuff. And then, but yeah, that's when I met all the Transistor guys, and then my friend John that was playing second guitar in the band, was like prone to just having like really bad anxiety attacks and stuff, and just like didn't want to play as much as they wanted to, didn't want to like tour really, and kind of backed out. And back then it was like regional shows for like a touring band, like people would drive, like Transistor would drive down to like bumfuck Connecticut to like play with like Page 99, because like
Right.
it was Page 99. Like if you got a chance to go open for them, like you went and did it.
Right.
And that was like the breaking point with that kid John. He like didn't show up to the Connecticut show for Page, and then I was booking the Page show in Manchester. So then they showed up, and I didn't put my band on for some reason. Then we were all just like sitting around, and they're like, "Yeah, so John didn't show up last night. Do you wanna join Transistor?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure."
It was that.
It was like this really like weird, like nonchalant, like it was just like, "Do you want to like come and try out and like learn some of the songs beforehand?" And at that point, it was like, well, they already had a tour booked. They're putting out their record on Level Plane.
Was this the full length that they were putting out, or?
That was the very first one. So it was like technically a full length. I guess it was like 9 songs, but everyone touted it as like an EP.
EP, got it. Okay.
So yeah, they had just recorded that with Will, and then Killingsworth, and then they were putting it out, and so I was just like, yeah, this is fucking awesome. Like I'm gonna get a chance to like go on tour. And then we all like, I don't know, I'd learned the songs. We all pitched in a van, and I think that was like 2001 or 2002. 2001 it had to be.
Right. So you kind of looked at this as where, okay, this is a cool opportunity because like, this band is obviously more established than what I'm currently doing. And so, you obviously looked at it as like a step up in a way where it's like, oh, cool. Like,
yeah.
This makes sense.
Yeah. And the other band was like fizzling out. And then I started playing with Transistor, and it did just feel like a step up. And like they were all, they welcomed me with like complete open arms and like let me into their, little group of friends. And then I, got to play all these like crazy shows with all these bands that I really liked. And
you played guitar in that, right?
Yeah, I played guitar and did like backup vocals, or like had like the sporadic like one-liner or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I was just like, second seat to Nat, because he was like the focus of the band. But he's like such a fucking amazing songwriter.
Right.
Like, I was just like, just complimenting what he did. I like in no way wanted to be a songwriter in that band. I just wanted to add texture and like get a chance to like rip off all the bands that I liked.
Yeah, I did. That time was definitely really interesting when you had a lot of these, when I say a lot of these type of bands, like obviously Level Plane as a label really started to grow to prominence, and a lot of the stuff that was had hit in the late 90s, and then you have bands like obviously Thursday completely referencing You and I, Seisha, and all that type of stuff, and it's like it was just so interesting. I remember when because Makoto did some dates with like Hot Cross, and this is when Hot Cross was just talking to like Equal Vision to sign to them, and it was just so it was so strange how that stuff all started to be like labels were paying attention to it, because they're like, yeah, it has some sense of melody, but we don't exactly know what to do with it, like it was just so strange. And like you said, I mean, a band that you referenced before, like J.R. Ewing, where it was like they were so incredible what they did, and like they were huge over in Sweden, but then they come to the States and people are just
like, Norway.
Yeah, Norway. Sorry, my fault. Yes, very important distinction. Yeah. But yeah, it was just so strange. Like, and then that was, like you said, that was like when International Noise Conspiracy, and so it was just interesting to kind of watch all that play itself out, and how obviously you were kind of in the middle of it as well, as far as just being on Level Plane and playing all those shows and stuff like that. Did you Did you get a sense of that at all? Like, did you feel like, wow, this is kind of weird because there's this scene sort of burgeoning?
Yeah, it definitely it felt a little bit strange just because for so long, like, um, it was definitely like the fucking bad stepchild of like
Yeah.
hardcore stuff, because an hour south we have Boston where there's every amazing like really heavy hardcore band and like just like from Converge to HopeCon or whatever, like just these bands that are so much more, I don't know, just have balls. And then you get these like sassy little fucking, what would be called like, emo kids or scene kids now or whatever, like with fucking
Right.
long hair, and like having it go from like, they're this like, stupid ginger stepchild to like, all these labels are trying to pick up Hot Cross or like, I remember when, what the fuck band was that from Long Island? They signed to Rev and like the whole Long Island scene, like
Oh, on the Might of Princes, or?
on the Might of Princes, yes.
Yep, yep.
Everyone was just like, torn between like, was that like a good move or
Yeah.
what? Like just, I mean, there was like a whole like documentary about that, like on a Long Island like punk rock
Right.
VHS tape or something. I remember, but
I think you bring up a very good point in regards to this, like in my own mind, what you're describing, like because before, like when I say before, like whatever mid late '90s, like you had bands that a band like Transistor to Transistor can play with Converge, they can play with a bunch of different type of bands, they can play with like a total mid '90s emo band and not feel weird about that. But
mhm.
then, yeah, like in early 2000s, that's when you started to see a definitive switch where it's like, you had your bands like, American Nightmare and Hope Conspiracy that, they just, and not because they don't like the personal members of the band wouldn't want to play with, a band like Transistor, but it just wouldn't work as a show. Like,
Yeah,
kids didn't want to
it
see
was
that.
a total switch. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
like if you weren't, Suicide File or Dedication or whatever, like any local, like real hardcore band, like yeah, there was like a year switch where it went from like, oh yeah, like the Business Rad Show with like all these, you know, different sounding hardcore bands where it's just like a hardcore band's a hardcore band, like whatever. It doesn't matter if it's like a 4-piece where the guitarist sings or if it's like, like they have a fucking, or like it's Page 99 and they have an 8-piece band and like 2 singers and like,
Right.
it didn't matter. And then all of a sudden there was like, I think maybe, just when like American Nightmare turned into the biggest hardcore band in the world,
Right, right.
um, there was like that definitive switch where like there was just another boom of bands like, Suicide File and Dedication
Yeah.
and on the West Coast like Breaker Breaker and all that stuff, like,
Right.
Shark Attack and like
Hmm.
it was, all of a sudden there's like these like quote like real hardcore bands like coming up and like everyone else was just like the step kid still. But
Right.
then when labels did kind of like figure out that, Hot Cross is filled with like 4 incredible musicians and they're like writing very like accessible stuff, like because, like you said, like Thursday was like completely referencing like their old bands
Hmm.
and stuff like that. Like it was definitely a weird thing to notice, but at the same time, I think a lot of it was like very well deserved. Like, and I
Yeah.
think it totally explains now where 10 years later, there's that cycle happening, like almost again. But I think everyone's a little bit more accepting of not putting up those walls, not saying like, oh, well, this is like a real hardcore band and you guys are just like a bunch of like pussy emo kids like trying to play heavy music. Like that does happen as far as like,
Yeah.
deathcore or whatever the fuck you want to call it, or like
Yeah.
all those
Oh, for sure.
different like moshy singer,
hmm
you know, a singer with the swoop haircut, and they sing and scream, like whatever you want to call that. Like there is a definitive line with that, I guess. But as far as like getting, you know, a La Dispute or Touche Amore or whomever, like, you know, kids consider that like a hardcore band, which is great. Like it's and those bands totally would have fit in with what was going on back in like 2000 or 2001 to 2002. Like
No, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely there's I think there's larger there are, like you said, there are walls that still exist, and I mean for good reason, because obviously it's like, I could never imagine La Dispute doing Warped Tour. Like, they just wouldn't like not only, I mean, not only knowing them personally because they probably wouldn't enjoy that, but at the same time, like, well, a band like you guys could obviously like, succeed on Warped Tour.
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, there are, I mean, a lot of Dispute could succeed on Warped Tour as well, but like you said, there's, I mean, even a band like Title Fight, like even though they did very well on this past year's Warped Tour, like, it was still kind of a, the guys in the band were like, wow, this is a whole new weird world that we're not comfortable with. That's the wall that like still exists, just because it's like, you're thrust on this really prestigious historic tour that draws these kids that obviously, like, kids that go to Warped Tour, it's like they go to like one show a year, like maybe I mean, there's obviously a large portion of the crowd that goes to more than that, but there are kids that their parents just give them $100 and they're like, all right, go see like 50 of your favorite bands in one day. That's like more bang for the buck. But yeah, I think you definitely did describe it perfectly when you said it's obviously cyclical. Everything in music is cyclical, and now we're just seeing that sort of 10-year cycle sort of hitting. And so obviously, like, as you're doing Transistor, as you're doing it, did you ever feel because it is difficult touring with bands, like, a lot of people that haven't done it don't understand that, where it's just like, oh yeah, like, dude, different city every day, like, super fun. Did you always feel like, as you started to experience that, were there ever those moments where you're just like, oh, yo, this is not what I signed up for. This is, holy shit, like, this is terrible?
Not really. Like, I was so young still. I was like 20, 21, 22, 23, no, 22, I think, when I left.
Okay.
I was still so young that everything was just amazing.
Right.
Like, I just,
right.
Every opportunity was just like, let's fucking do this. Like, we did an 80-day tour with Light the Fuse and Run, like, over the whole summer. And I don't think that there was one day where I was like not having fun. Like, it was, and I was still straight edge at the time. So
right.
I was,
did you say 80-day tour?
80 days, yeah.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah, and it was great. It was, getting to tour with Fuse for that long was awesome. Like, me and Chris Kirby became really, really good friends, and everyone in that band at the time was fucking amazing. Like, they're all incredible people. But yeah, I mean, that was like the longest tour I've ever done. And now thinking about that, I'd rather just not even think about it. Like, I could not do that to myself again.
Yeah.
Because it's just, I was just young and full of piss and vinegar, and just like, yeah, let's go out and fucking tear it up all around the country. And like, who cares if kids show up to shows?
Right.
And, just thinking about like all the crazy things that happened on that tour, I'm like, if that happened to me now, I would quit. I would leave. Like, I wouldn't be able to deal with it. Like,
yeah.
But I was also like a young, dumb kid. Like,
right. I
fucking got caught shoplifting on that tour in Louisville, Kentucky, and spent 2 days in jail.
Right.
Because, like, I was just a fucking idiot, and I stole for a living, pretty much.
Right.
And And like,
And that's what you did.
you know, and that's just what I did. And then I got caught, and I fucking spent 2 days in like the federal prison in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. And
Mhm.
It sucked.
Right.
But
Well,
then,
I couldn't imagine you being like, "Oh, this is awesome. I'm really glad this happened."
well, I mean, I guess like there's certain places in the country that I'd be like, okay, I'm in jail. Like, all right, whatever. But
Right.
in Louisville, it was just like a bunch of fucking pillheads, and like the only reason I didn't get my ass kicked is because like I had tattoos, I think, and then
Because you look tough.
this. No, I didn't look tough at all. I just looked like a crazy person.
Sure.
But you know, like just like sleep deprived. I didn't sleep for the 2 days I was in there, and I was up for a full day before that, so I was like just out of my mind. And
Right.
then this dude Tom that was from Pittsburgh like took the bunk next to me. We were in this like transitional cell, so it was like people who were like, you know, just in for the night, like drunk tank type of thing, and then there was people who were, you know, arrested on like crazy drug charges, and they were like awaiting a real cell, like to get put into the population. Then there were people in like orange jumpsuits chained to the wall who were, you know, murderers and were awaiting a trial. You know, they'd only be in there for like an hour or something, but you know, it was just insane and crazy.
Right, right. And so then, as Transistor started to, you know, to die down on the touring, and like, I mean, the way that you guys kind of, you know, broke up, it just sort of, you know, fizzled out as opposed to like this huge blowout where you guys were like, you hate each other and that type of stuff. Am I right? Or was there?
Oh, I left before that even happened.
Got it.
I quit on our first European tour. I quit in Prague because me and the bass player weren't getting along at all. So, and we had like kicked out our drummer on the tour before that. So my friend Julia from the New Trust was filling in on drums, and then we all went to Europe, and I quit on that tour, like maybe with like 5 days left, and then they got Brad from Wolves to take my place, and then they kicked out the bass player, and my friend Garrison, who I still work with, who is actually going to play bass in Alcoa,
Okay.
started playing bass. And then they fizzled out. Nat got appendicitis on their last tour,
Oof.
and like on the way to their first show of the tour, he started complaining about stomach pains, and then it got to the point where he like couldn't move, so they went to the ER in like Connecticut or something, and then they were like, yeah, your appendix is about to rupture.
Oh.
So then he was in the hospital for like a week and a half, and so they missed the whole tour, and then he had recovery and all this stuff, and then that was it. They like just didn't play ever again, and Nat went off to college to finish his degree. He's like getting his doctorate right now, and he's like crazy into cycling, and I still work with Garrison at the record store, and I think Brad's in Philly, and Julia still plays in the New Trust, and then James, who ended up playing drums like full time for them, actually just opened up a new tattoo shop in Portsmouth, so he lives out here now.
And so, as you were doing Transistor, and obviously you were touring and doing all that, like, you know, did your parents ever have any sense of like, oh, cool, like he's at least doing something with himself?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, going back to like them being really supportive, like when I quit and left on like kind of bad terms, my dad was like, you sure, like you want to do this, like you want to leave? And I was like, yeah, like it's over. But at that point I had already started playing with this band Sparrows Swarm and Sing, so I like had that project, and then did that for like a couple of years, and that was like an instrumental, like Godspeed style instrumental thing, and then so I had this other project, and then I like did some other bands, and I like joined a pop band on the promise that it was like we were gonna get signed to fucking some like startup label from somebody, I don't even know.
Oh,
But I
really?
like
So it
joined
was
this.
it was like a major label sort of thing, like, oh, this is what's going to happen with this.
Yeah, it was like I got totally duped. I mean, if my friend AJ hears this interview, he's gonna be mad at me. But I was working with this kid AJ at this marketing company while I was working at the record store. I worked for this music marketing company that did like Barsuk and all these all these really great indie labels, and his brother played bass, and he quit just because he was like getting married and like starting a life and whatever.
Hmm.
And so he's like, "Oh yeah, you want to join this band?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, I guess." He's like, "Yeah, like we're getting looked at by so and so and so and so," and then like the drummer from Straylight Run had us like go down to his friend's studio and record like 4 songs to like shop around, and it was like, yeah, he has really good feeling about it. He's gonna, and it was like it was like photo finish or something. He thought that we had a shot
Oh, okay.
getting on that because he had done it with like 2 other bands or something like that. But at that point, like everyone in the band was like 24. I think I was the youngest. I was like 24, 25,
Hmm.
and everyone else was. Or no, I wasn't the youngest, but I don't know. There were a couple guys older where they were like 26, 27, and no one wants to see a pop band with like mid-20s dudes like
Tattooed dudes.
with like tattooed assholes like with fucking 5 o'clock shadows at noon, looking like they're hungover
Right.
and playing like pop rock for their fucking 16-year-old daughter. Like
Right.
no one wants that.
Right. You guys would you guys would be the backing band to, pre like late teens, really shaved, beautiful hair, all that type of stuff. You guys could be the backing band for that.
Yeah, we would have worked much better at that.
That's funny. And
But
so
yeah, I did that for like a little bit, and then met the kid that introduced me to Jay, and then that's how Defeater happened.
that's how you fell into Defeater.
Yeah, just by sheer happenstance.
And usually that's how the best things happen, where it's just like, oh, okay, like, we kind of have same musical tastes, and this would be kind of
Yeah.
fun. Because I mean, the way the Defeater started from, all intent and purposes, like, there was definitely a focus and a purpose behind it. It definitely wasn't just like this, because I mean, you guys were definitely had been in a few bands, and obviously people were a little more experienced rather than just like, oh, dude, we're 16 and like let's cover NoFX.
Yeah, exactly. We had all been around the block enough where especially Jay and I were we're like the fucking old jaded dudes in the band where even when we first started it 4 years ago, like we were the oldest, and we're just like, yeah, we want to like have this be just one big piece of art, have it all mean something. We're not like trying to be big. Who cares if this never goes anywhere? Even if we just do one record and then we call it quits, like let's just have it be this all encompassing, piece of art, the statement about something.
Right.
And and so yeah, the fact that Jay and I actually did what we set out to do, 4 years later, I mean, just the conversations that we had the first couple times we were even talking about like doing the concepts and stuff before any lyrics were written.
Mm-hmm.
It just, if I actually think about it, it blows my mind. I'm just like, how the fuck did this really work? Like,
Right.
and turn into something that like now I get to see the world all the time.
Right. You get to see the world, and obviously, like it resonates with people, and I think
Yeah.
I've been thinking about a lot of, I mean, especially in the way that sort of, whether it's pop culture, music culture, any art that you really want to reference, it seems so people are really attracted to and drawn to, when people either expose themselves, are honest, and, really just kind of, put themselves out there. Like I mean, one of my favorite comedians, like Louis C.K., where it's just like, the honesty in which he approaches his his television show, his stand-up act, all that type of stuff is like, he just says
Yeah.
he says shit and that he means,
Yeah.
obviously. And so it's really interesting to see that obviously trickle down to why bands like Defeater and bands like you were referencing, like La Dispute, Touche, where it's just like a lot of people would look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's like you said, crybaby stuff, like heart in your sleeve and whatever, even though you guys
Yeah.
like Defeater falls a little outside of that because there's obviously more of a narrative behind it. But it's just really interesting to kind of see all that sort of honesty play itself out as being like, oh, like this can actually quote unquote work as a business model.
Yeah, totally. It's really strange and interesting to see that happen. And like, I think that's a reason why a lot of the bands that are like quote unquote like big today
Mm-hmm.
are doing well, because people stopped trying to like fit in with like swoopy haircuts and like playing breakdowns to be like the most like crushing band and like all that shit. And they were just like, oh well, if we just like actually talk about life and like we actually just play music that we want to play, like I mean, look at like Balancing Composure. It's like the simplest, most like emotive music and lyrics, and like they're absolutely fucking huge.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're no matter who you are, like if you're a young girl or you're like a 30-something-year-old dude, like you can see that honesty and you're just like, that's a fucking great band. Like
Yeah.
those kids like really get it.
Right. No, I mean that's it's totally true, and it's nice to be able to see that as as a trend and something that obviously it's a really great introduction point. If a person gets into that type of stuff initially when they're 14, 15 years old, they may gravitate towards that for the rest of their lives, and obviously it would filter out to different portions of their life, and that's obviously what you want. She's like, yeah, I want you to have an honest experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
And in sort of, obviously kind of, like you were saying, reflecting on Defeater and looking at like how weird it is that, a lot of the, visions and goals that you had when you were just, dicking around in the formation of it, have been able to kind of, come true. I mean, I know this will probably be difficult for you to pinpoint because I know it's difficult to have that one moment where, when did you feel like Defeater kind of like flipped a switch where it was like, oh wow, like people are really getting what we're doing? Whether it's like, a kid coming up to you after a show and, showing you a Defeater tattoo or whatever, like having those moments of just like, oh shit, like this is way more real than I ever thought it would be,
Yeah, I think like there's a couple times where I just really got, taken aback and was just like, oh shit, like this is really happening. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the first time we went overseas, like it was just all this like just big whirlwind of like, okay, well, like this is what bands do now. Like it's much easier to tour overseas. I've been here once with Transistor. Like I kind of know the ropes a little bit, and then like went over with Polar Bear Club and Ruiner, and it was just like this amazing tour of just everyone got really close, and like
Mm-hmm.
just getting to tour with these like amazing bands overseas. I was like, wow, this is like really mind blowing, and like our record was only out for like 7 months or something like that, and we were like already playing in England and like doing this like English tour, and we're just like, what the fuck is going on? Like,
Right.
and every night, it's not like we were like killing it every night, but every night there'd be the kids up front singing along, and then Ruiner would get up there and destroy the place. But having those kids like in England across the Atlantic Ocean singing back at me, I was just like, okay, this is like really weird.
Yeah.
And then a couple months later, we went over with Comeback Kid and did a tour with them and like did a bunch of festivals, and it was just like really strange to get like thrown into that mix, and then like played a bunch of club shows on that, and then up with like the Have Heart, Shipwreck, Rise and Fall tour on that, and
Mm-hmm.
had some more like crazy shows where, you know, now it was like 15 kids or 20 kids in the crowd like knew who we were and were singing along, and I was like, Jesus Christ, like our record has not even been out for a year, like.
Right.
So that was like pretty wild. And then I think another big one was when we went over and did a Euro tour with Dead Swans and More Than Life. The first show was Groves Rock, and it was like a big outdoor fest.
Right.
And we played like the small stage, and it's still like a few thousand people under this tent, and it was just chaos. And I was just like absolutely blown away. We watched This Is Hell the day beforehand, and Trev asked me to come out and do Permanence with him, and like I was so fucking nervous, like just pissing my pants nervous, like before
Right.
before I did it, because I was just like looking at all these people and like seeing how crazy people were going for This Is Hell. And This Is Hell was like one of the bands that like kept me interested in hardcore. Like I had like kind of forgotten about it for a couple of years, and then Sundowning came out after. I thought the EP was good. I loved the 108 cover. I thought it was awesome. And then like I just I wasn't like looking forward to a full length or anything. And then Sundowning came out, and I was like, oh my God, like a band that actually sounds like pissed off hardcore kids rather than like, you know, just contrived, like we're being a hardcore band to be a hardcore band.
Right.
So I absolutely love Sundowning and blah, blah, blah. So getting to do that with Trav, like makes, I don't know, just makes me really happy. But,
Yeah.
So like did that, and then we played, and I those 2 days were just like, okay, like this is like a real thing. Like new record, Lost Ground had just come out. These people were like, you know, singing along to these songs that I modeled after, like legit, just like history,
Mm-hmm.
and having people like respond to that in a way that, you know, was positive. Like they're having fun at these shows. They're singing along to these words that are, you know, based around, I mean, not to get into like what it is, but like we're in Belgium, like
Right.
singing about shit that went on in this country.
Right.
And like, it was just this like really eye-opening, just like, all right, like time to like really buckle down and like take this seriously. Like this is my life now. Like now
Right.
Defeater is a band.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a really like, I like how you put that, because it's like, you definitely do feel, you know, especially it's like coming from obviously like where we've come from, where you all of a sudden feel like a sense of responsibility, and not like in a bad way, but a sense of responsibility where it's just like, okay, what we are creating as a band is, you know, is actually becoming, you know, meaningful and is actually resonating with people. And like you said, obviously it can be, you know, in a city next door, or it can be in, you know, a completely different continent.
Yeah.
But then when you actually do, you know, recognize that in yourself, and then obviously you hope that the rest of the guys in the band also recognize that as well. And then that's kind of when you do shift a gear, and you kind of go into this different mindset where it's like, okay, like, you know, there has to be a level of organization behind this, and we have to be professional
Yeah.
about this, and you know, this isn't
Yeah, that part didn't happen.
right.
We didn't. That part didn't happen until much later.
Right. No, yeah. I mean, when it's forced upon you, but yeah, just the sense of responsibility where it's just like, okay, like, you know, you know, I'm not in, I mean, you guys would be doing it even if you were in an echo chamber playing to 10 people, you would just be doing it, you know,
Yeah.
on a much smaller level. But the fact that it is connecting with people, you know, and you do feel that is cool. Like I said, you definitely shift a mental gear where it's like, okay, like I have no problem doing this, and this is fine to commit myself to.
Yeah, 100%. Like it just hit me, and I was like, all right, this is what I do now.
Right.
So.
Right. And sort of, you know, to wrap things up in a somewhat cohesive manner, and the idea of, you know, where you sit now, like, 'cause how old are you?
31.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm 32, like and I figured we were the same age. So as we've grown older within this scene, like, and this is what I tell people, where it's like, it's more work to obviously stay involved, to, care, to just pay attention to music, whether or not, you're paying attention to hardcore or punk, whatever, independent music in general. It takes work to be involved. The older you get,
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. And obviously it's easy when you're, 17, because you have nothing but time. Like there's nothing else that's more important than fucking going to shows or whatever. And so you yourself in your own head, and obviously transitioning into different parts of your life, because you do have, Defeater has an interesting thing where it's like, you guys are able to tour when you want to, as opposed to like, okay, we have to tour 300 days out of the year because this is our sole source of income. Like we've got nothing else to rely on.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And so, basically kind of what keeps you connected is the fact that you do have sort of, not sort of, but you do have a real life outside of the band, or is it, just the fact that, like you said, this band is obviously meaningful to someone else besides you and the other guys that are playing on the stage? What sort of, keeps you involved from that perspective?
I think it's like a solid mixture of both. Like the fact that, I can still, still have like a great home life to come to and like, or come home to, and like get to work in, still like in a record store, where I get to still play the music I want to, and like, like get to go home and like play the Silver Snakes record and like turn kids on to that after we like come home from a tour with them, and like have people, What?
I said, yeah, no, that's cool that you still have that connection where you can do that at a record store and still have music as obviously a center point.
Yeah, and I don't know, and then like still, Alyssa's, younger than me, and she's still like full of fucking piss and vinegar and wanting to go to shows, and like, that like fire is still in her, where, she wants to like go fucking, she'll drag me out to like go see Cold World, and I love Ice Grills. I think that record's amazing. Right. But I probably wouldn't like, at 31, like still want to go out and like and see that. But then like when we went, I was like, fuck, I miss hardcore shows. Like just being at a hardcore show, not playing one. Mm-hmm. And like that type of thing is like an eye opener, and like keeps me, wanting to like support, local stuff and like bands coming through, and then, and then like having Alcoa as like a side project and stuff. Like I want to, keep playing music and like hopefully, play something different, but have like some of those same kids like hopefully attach themselves to that too. Like hopefully have kids still enjoy the songwriting and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things that like still keep me involved and excited about punk rock and hardcore, and the fact that as much as I don't listen to hardcore and stuff as much, like there's still those bands that like, I can still go and listen to the Adamantium records and like fucking get pumped.
That's awesome. Like,
like I'll put on When It Rains It Pours and just fucking remember like what it was like to listen to that record for the first time.
Right, for sure. Well, that's great that you can still have that. So, well, I think this is the best place to leave it off at, because I mean, when someone says Adamantium, we can game's over, dude. Game's over. It's perfect. Well, I appreciate you obviously following up and wanting to do. This is my first in-person / on the phone interview, so you're making history.
Oh, thanks, popping your cherry.
So there you go. Sorry, this was a very long conversation, but Derek had a lot of things to say, and he was in the mood to talk, so I, just kind of let him roll. So visit propertyofzach.com, visit 100wordspodcast.com, And I'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.